All right. So my name is Mandeep Basi, and my connection to this event is from my time studying anthropology. I did my PhD at Simon Fraser University, and I studied medical anthropology, you could call it. So basically, healthcare practices amongst urban Indian consumers. I looked at traditional medicine called Ayurveda in the time of great socioeconomic transformation in India from the time of 2006, 2007. From there, I eventually made my way to becoming a researcher in industry, working at a big tech company. And now, over the past few months, in the process of starting my own research consultancy. What I'll be talking about today are the skills that I acquired, the skills that I gained during the PhD, these being the durable, transferable skills that I could leverage as I transitioned my career afterwards, skills that I learned and could acquire after the PhD, as well as I will conclude with 2 or 3 slides about a little framework to help you think about creating a meaningful career transition or just for you to reflect on where you are right now. So when I was a graduate student in anthropology, I knew that there were some things that I really enjoyed doing. Namely, if we wanted to categorize all that, it's the technical applied research part of it, the craft of research. So I really enjoyed matching, methods to the questions, doing research, analyzing findings, challenging my assumptions. I think these are things that many anthropologists enjoy. So, I mean, doing this, it didn't come easy, but it was really rewarding and there was a lot of meaning in it for me. Other dimensions of doing, anthropology in a university academic setting was things that I enjoyed a little bit less. Teaching in a group setting, teaching, a group of people consistently over a period of time for one term, that was something that just didn't really work well for me. It's just, a bit more of my personality in which I don't like speaking in front of a group. I don't like being the center of attention. I don't get energy from it. So I just felt really worn out by it. Second, writing in the way for an academic audience, such as journals and so on, that just felt really difficult for me and not intrinsically rewarding, although I did enjoy reading them. Also, working alone, I think studying social sciences and anthropology, you're sort of the lone wolf. There's not much of a lab or a team and so on. So I do like to spend time alone, but working alone, it just wasn't good for me. It was bringing out, worse tendencies of procrastination. I tend to need feedback that propels me to go forward. Feedback in terms of I'm creating something and the way it looks out in the world, or just feedback from, hearing ideas from other people. So what the most important thing for me was my North Star, so to speak, was, okay, research. So long as I get to do qualitative research, I'm going to be happy. So those are the sort of like priorities that I had. So in terms of skills and traits that, got me into graduate programs and allowed me to acquire degrees, and we all have these in anthropology or other social sciences, it's critical thinking, written communication, ability to self-reflect, comfort with ambiguity, as well as this intrinsic curiosity. And these are the transferable, durable skills that propelled me through various, different professional roles that I had. Just trying to get to the next slide. What I needed to learn. Now, the things that I write here, I didn't write them to say, hey, you got a graduate degree, guess what? Here's a bunch more things that you need to learn. It's not over yet. Why I wrote these down here is that these are learnable skills. If you need to learn a new domain, I worked in e-commerce at Shopify for 4.5 years. I was able to learn e-commerce, and anyone else can too, in terms of different domains. New work processes, also you can learn those. New ways of communication. I'll elaborate on that a little bit later, but just compared to what I was exposed to in academia, where, written text was really where like a lot of information is like, displayed and respected. outside of academia, it's really oral communication and organizing information in a different way, according to the audience that you're speaking with. And, I think we all do that a little bit anyways. If you just think about all the different ways in which you've shared what you focus on with your research, you probably speak about it differently with your family members, with your friends who are not in the same program as you, with your colleagues who are in the same program. It's this ability to just focus on different things depending on what your audience is familiar with. So learning how to, figure out what your audience needs are and communicate effectively, that's something I just really learned a lot about. Here is a high-level summary of the professional transitions that I undertook since from the PhD time onwards. That black line indicates where that was like the biggest transition and possibly the most meaningful one for me. What I am trying to highlight here is, even though I switched from PhD in anthropology to studying medical education, doing a postdoc there, and then being a UX research at a company, some of these transitions overlapped more than others. So social sciences and medical education, they were, different in some ways, and that, for medical education, I was speaking a lot with doctors that do very different work than social scientists, but it was also similar in other ways, inside this university environment, outputs, articles. In medical education, other outputs are also just, workshops to implement new findings in the field. From being a UX researcher at a big company to what I'm doing now, self-employed, there's a fair amount of overlap over there too. When you look at anything up close, they're not always so neat. Things get a little bit messy. So professional transitions, they're not all of the same kind of change or caliber. They're not continuous. There can be gaps. Some of these are a bit shorter than others. My postdoc was 1.5 years. My anthropology degree in PhD, that was 10 years. That took a really long time. So just to explain a little bit about these gaps, these white spaces between the puzzle pieces, I'll do that for the next few slides. So after completing my PhD in anthropology, which was in December, I started a postdoc 9 months later, and I was attracted to doing this postdoc in medical education because it was an opportunity to do more qualitative research, participant observation. So that's what pulled me to it. In terms of challenges, I had to learn a new field. So in 1.5 years, I had to do a lit review, write a proposal, get ethics clearance, do field work, analyze, put out a journal article. So, that was really hard just to grapple with all of that. This article, I just put it here because it summarizes the kind of work that I did with medical education. Basically, what I got to learn about was work-based learning. How do doctors and medical students and residents learn to teach, which they have to learn by doing? So I found that to be really interesting. And, just the community of practice of physicians, I got to really look into that. And what this article is about, the findings is just teaching in a clinical setting. It takes place on the spectrum, which includes planned teaching, goals you want to achieve as a teacher, opportunistic teaching, something just comes up. You happen to visit a patient, and then you want to teach a medical student about heart rates and like reading a pulse. So that's an opportunistic teaching moment. Formal teaching in a classroom, informal teaching, a conversation that happens casually in the hallway. So by doing participant observation, I just got to look into that and see how teaching was, structured by a multiplicity of teachers. There's the physician that teaches, the resident that teaches, those who are more junior, using space and artifacts. If you're meeting with your team where the administrative nursing station is, you learn different things there versus, being in like a private conference room. So after concluding that, foray into medical education, what came next for me was this gap of a year and a half between that and doing full-time permanent work. And it does take time. So, just want to highlight that. I know in academia, it also takes time to get the job that fits you and that you really, really want. And in industry, it can also take some time. So what happened in the meantime? How did I bridge that chasm? Like, how did I overcome that gap? Well, I was based in Montreal, and I knew that I wanted to do research in industry. So I just began to look around me. What were the resources and the opportunities in my local environment? What were communities that were out there? Who were individuals that I could meet? This was around 2015, 2016, and Montreal did have a lively startup ecosystem. It probably does, but because of COVID, it's hard to say what's going on. Everything is virtual now. So I got to learn about the startup ecosystem in Montreal. I met people, networked, learned of events, attended them, lots of socializing in real life and also through social media. If I were to do this now, these are just some examples of resources that attracted me. This one I just looked up a few days ago. So this is a Startup Montreal community group, and they have this calendar that shows different events that are taking place. So, if I was me a few years ago, I probably would have been interested in the World Ethical Data Forum of 2021. I mean, I'm still interested in it now, but I would have been more motivated to see it then, or perhaps March 17th, creative collisions, tech and collaborations between healthcare and life science. Maybe that, food tech 500. These are things I might have attended just to see, okay, what's going on around me? Who's attending these things? What's the role for research? Hey, I did medical anthropology. Is there something there that I can contribute to this healthcare and life science event? This is some other resource that I found. It's probably, something parallel that happens in other cities, but this is in a center called Notman. And there, if you're a startup, you can rent a space for a little while. And they also hold events, and there's a cafe in the basement where you can go to do your work and have meetings. A game changer community event, at least community group for me, that I came across was a group called Hacking Health. And I came across them as I was doing research for my postdoc. I just saw this poster inside a hospital and I took note of it. And they have hackathons, which are weekend-long work sessions in which you come as someone that has, an idea to solve a solution in healthcare through technology, maybe so that makes healthcare more efficient, something that makes healthcare less costly, or perhaps, just anything like that. So I thought, okay, if I attend a hackathon, I can sort of see how people work and how things get created. So I attended this hackathon in which the person that had the idea was talking about she wanted to make it easier for new parents to get worthwhile, trustworthy information for their infants. In Quebec, when you become a new parent, you get this giant, heavy book, which is really great. But when you're a parent, you're sort of wandering around everywhere, and it's like, okay, where's that book? What's happening right now? So her idea was just to, create something like an app, put that book basically into a phone app. So that way you could take a look at it and get the information you need to be okay, teething, etc. So that project attracted me to work on it. I forget why, but it seemed like a very sensible, scalable project, and it just felt things are really difficult for parents, and I want to help. I want to help with this. So when I spoke with the person who's leading the project, she asked me what my interests were, and then she wrote down. She's like, "Okay, Mandeep, user experience researcher," and that was the first time I heard what that term was. And so then I looked it up and I realized, oh, okay, that's what I am. I am someone that wants to, create things and make sure that the person you have in mind knows how to use it and how to understand it. So this is the team that I was part of for a couple of days, and we won a little People's Choice Award. However, we didn't really get very far because there just wasn't enough funding to help this book become an app. But it was a good learning experience to see like, okay, like what happens here and like who are we going to speak with and how do we pitch the project. So I stayed with Hacking Health as a volunteer for a little bit. I attended talks and blogged about them, like marketed that. And I felt like, okay, well, background in medical anthropology, this is health and tech, like maybe this is going to be the way to go for me. Another resource that I came across, there's this consultancy called IDEO, and they have this 6-week course on human-centered design, and it's remote and free. I took it a few years ago, and I forget how, but somehow you could see if there's people interested in doing the course in Montreal. So I saw that there was, and then I just joined a team. So that was another way in which to meet local people in Montreal, do something with them, and see like the kind of tools they use and how they work. So in that gap of a year and a half, I did these things. I also got a job as a UX researcher. I also lost that job as a UX researcher. I was working for a startup for 5 weeks. And in the end, after a couple of weeks, I had a meeting with them and they're like, well, we're going to have to let you go because you don't have what we need in terms of, what we hoped for and expected when hiring a UX researcher. So, failure is just part of the road. It's just like, part of what happens when you ultimately want to be successful because you're trying things out, not really sure what's going on. And so, like looking back on this, in terms of like why I didn't succeed there or why I wasn't poised to succeed there was I was just too junior for that role. It was a startup. I was going to be researcher of one. The manager hoped that I'd be more self-sufficient than I was, but I had to do everything on my own for the first time. Carry out research, advocate for research, socialize the team to research. Like all these things are learnable, but it's something that, I needed to see happening in front of me before I could be like, oh, okay, this is how you do it. So then the solution as I was getting let go of was the manager was saying, maybe you just need to be somewhere where there's like a bigger company and things move a bit more at a different speed. There's more time for you. So, and yeah, I did end up working at a bigger company where, there's more of an onboarding program, more research support. I joined, a team of 12 researchers, which kept growing. More time to get context compared to, a more fast-moving startup. So, anyone can get hired by projects or companies that are eager for research, and then you can also get let go of, and it's not your fault, but you still have you still need to deal with, that kind of like upsetness or the imposter syndrome. So that's just something to watch out for. So months later, a friend that I had met from working on that IDEO project, she alerted me to a job posting by Shopify on LinkedIn. And I remember writing down like on my to-do list, okay, I must apply for this job. I also remember writing down my doubts on that list. It's like, should I apply? 60% chance of getting it. Is this worth my while? I did get the job. So what can I say there? Don't let your doubts rule you. Give yourself a chance, because just coming from academia where everything's really competitive and it's really hard to get, funding. It's really hard to get a journal article. It's really hard to get a sessional position because it's not growing. Like these anthropology positions, at least a few years ago, is actually like less and less and less and less. But in the world of industry, if you look at like business news or stock market, it's always like expansion, expansion, expansion. Like we know there's problems there, but it's just a different mindset where companies are moving. They need someone to help them. That's it, so they're competing to get people rather than in academia where you're competing to get the job. So why did I get hired at Shopify, or how? Going back here to these transferable skills, um, I would summarize it as, they're looking at the potential, not just the credential, or the potential over the credential. Those words I got from listening to a podcast last week from the Harvard Business Review on just new recruiting practices in this post-COVID area. Because companies do hiring, and what they're thinking is like, what are the skills we need to ensure that a candidate can grow with us over time? Because they want to invest in you. Because they know that like once the candidate gets time to get oriented and like get on their feet, they're able to contribute a lot exponentially afterwards. So these are like the foundational solid skills that I had. Other things, e-commerce, expertise in UX, like a deep expertise. I didn't have that, so I had to learn that on the job. So in terms of UX, this is just a quick definition of it for user experience. But basically, artifact is just, whatever you're creating in this scenario, like some software that I'm creating. It's like, okay, here we go. Here's how it looks. Here's how it works. And then you're also thinking about, well, how does the person we have in mind, the business owner or like the user, like how are they going to interact with it? How they're going to feel? And you want them to, have a positive feeling, not just positive in terms of like, we want to make them happy, but also just positive as in like, they're able to complete the task that they need to get done. So if Zoom has, a UX team, which I know they do, and a UX researcher team, they probably had to figure out when they're designing their app to be like, okay, how do we make sure that the person who gets onto Zoom knows how to mute themselves and and use the camera and so on. So you want to make sure that like people are to carry out the thing that they want to do. So yeah, a lot of focus for me at least on task success. If someone had a UX researcher for like a university website, you probably want to make sure that they know how to like find things they need and to register. But then you also may want to have that emotional component of like, does a person feel excited when they land on the homepage and so on? Because you're also trying to convert your visitors into, customers and into students. So that's a picture of me over there. I was there for 4.5 years. It took, I came in as a UX researcher, and it took 2.5 years to be promoted to a senior UX researcher. And in terms of speed, in that context, the Shopify context, it didn't feel particularly fast. It didn't feel exceedingly slow either. Just because I'm a researcher, it didn't mean that I was like going to fast track my way to becoming like a director of research or a research manager, because it is having the research skills, but I also have to put work into translating those research skills into outcomes that improve user experience, or into outcomes that push the business objectives forward. So yeah, I went over some of the new things that I had to learn and which are learnable. I want to emphasize that. These things are much more learnable than something like critical thinking. If you, come to some point in your life where you're not sure how to carry out critical thinking, it's not something that you can just pick up quite easily. But yes, you can, pick up like, hey, what is user experience? Like that's something they're able to grasp easily. And then traits that anthropologists have, such as curiosity, like you have it or you don't maybe. And if you have curiosity, that really gives you fuel to push through things that are difficult, and it allows you to persist, and like endure so that you do get these really great insights. I want to spend some time here just talking about the new ways of communication, because that's something that I did work a lot on, and I think it's quite impactful once you have like different tools up your sleeve that you can use as needed. So in terms of new ways of communication, one is just asking good questions. As social scientists, we are evidence-based. We like to have a reason for coming to a conclusion, and just being in an industry setting and like asking why, highlighting assumptions, that's really valuable work because it shows blind spots that other team members might have. There is this critical reflection framework. It's called the what, the so what, the now what. I think we do this anyways as anthropologists, in which it's like, hey, I learned something really cool. It's like, okay. And then, the so what is you're showing like the theoretical implications of it, perhaps, and then the now what, myself as an anthropologist would probably be like, what are some new questions we have, right? So then you can still follow that same kind of formula when you're in industry, in which it's like, what's, the what? We learned something really cool. And then the so what is, what does this mean for the user experience? And then now what, what do we do next? You can go and make some recommendations as to what may happen, or it may involve the team in terms of like, okay, what should we do next? We noticed this happening from the research that we carried out. Whenever you communicate, probably you want to persuade somebody of something. So, know your audience, the word empathy, have empathy for your audience and not just your users, and see like what's important for them. How do I make a case for what I'd like to get done? Compared to an academic graduate setting, I think being at a big tech company, I saw it more as an oral culture. There's, a lot of meetings that we attend. There's a lot of like presentations and sharing. So it's not as if like the written word is like this, special thing that's like the golden rule. It's really just like speaking, and it's a way that you gain trust. It's a way that people become familiar with who you are. So a lot of oral communication. Visual communication, picture speaks 1,000 words. What are some ways in which you can share your findings in more of a visual way rather than text-based? Because it's just hard to read a lot of text quickly, and it's hard to get people to motivated to read a wall of text. So, even just diagrams or putting things into tables, color coding them, visualizing qualitative data, all those are like, ways in which one can practice visual communication. Starting as someone new in a company, sometimes you know what you're doing, but you don't know that you know. I recall a month into my role at Shopify, I was introduced the feature that I would be working on, and I had some questions about it, but I couldn't articulate it in a way that made sense in the business context. And now looking back, I could have just said, so what is the value proposition of this? What is the benefit for the user? And if I would said that, then that could just really help the conversation move quickly, because I was using words and vocabulary that's from like a shared system of meaning. So I guess a takeaway there is, there are terms, there are glossaries and so on for whichever new domain that you want to get into, so you can really familiarize yourself with that. But how? Many different ways. You can intake information, books, articles, podcasts. I'll be sharing a PDF of this slide, and then I'll have some examples of books and articles and podcasts if someone's interested in learning about how, I learned about UX research. All these terms in bold, these are just concepts that come from work-based learning. So some of the stuff I learned when I was doing my postdoc, these are just ways that humans like to learn, especially adults, like we don't want to be passive consumers. We like to be interactive, learn as we're doing things. So yeah, also learn by self-reflection, reading about things, applying it to my work, practicing, shadowing colleagues who are researchers, colleagues who were more senior, shadowing colleagues whose work overlap with mine. Also shadowing by looking at their research reports and so on. Scaffolding. If I had to carry out a new activity, I could see how someone more experienced carried out that activity. And then in this scenario, I had to mentor an intern. So, I had never done a hiring process of getting an intern. So I watched someone more senior do it, my manager. And then when I carried out the job interviews, she sat beside me and gave me feedback. And then when I mentored the intern, she also mentored me on how I was mentoring the intern. So this is just an example of scaffolding. People just eventually taper off. It's kind of like being a teaching assistant and then you become a sessional, just moving up like that. So last year, 2020, a lot of changes happened. A lot of changes happened at Shopify too, where I was working. A major change that happened in May was that it went completely remote. So the office, that I was sitting in, it doesn't exist in that same way as like a 9-to-5 place where people go. And also research got restructured. I could summarize it as being downsized so that, there aren't any more research interns, there aren't any more research managers. So as a result of that, I'm no longer at Shopify, but now I am venturing into starting my own business as being a UX research consultant. And I get to learn some more things. I get to be exposed to different industries because, I was working really in depth into one area at a big company. So now I'll have contracts that, I assume are like 5 to 7 weeks long, different areas. I'll do more education with my clients on what UX research is, because it may be something that they're not familiar with, whereas at Shopify was a very UX mature culture. Work with shorter timelines, marketing of myself, of my business. This is going to be something that I have to do because working at a big tech company, I could sort of just, forget about all that other stuff and just focus on what I needed to do. So I'm going to conclude here just by sharing a bit of a framework that I had come across a few months earlier, but when I was transitioning into starting my own business. And basically, it's a term from Japan called Ikigai. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And this helps you identify, let's say, if you're not sure what your passions are, or if you're not sure what your mission in life could be, like the reason that maybe you're put on this planet or something meaningful that you want to do, then doing an exercise like this could really help you identify that. Doing an exercise like this could also help you see maybe where you're over indexing and like places where you could also, spread yourself out to experience life in a different way or to be more balanced. So one exercise that, I had to do earlier this year and which you could do is just make a list, identify what you love, what you're good at, what you can be paid for. For any blind spots, it could also be fun to get, have a family member, friend to also do this for you, and be like, hey, what do you think I'm good at? What do you think I love? What do you think I think the world needs? What do you think I can be paid for? And then you can put all that together and just, look at these interests. And then you see here, there's like a bunch of overlapping Venn diagram circles. So, the intersection of what you love and what the world needs, that tells you a bit about what your mission could be. The intersection of what you're good at and what you can be paid for, that can give you a clue as to like what, some professions for you could be. And you can also use this as a bit of a diagnostic tool. I think there's many ways to use this. I don't have a particular aim with sharing this. I just wanted to, I think you can take it whichever direction you want. But I chose this particular infographic because it's also nice to see these diagnoses that there are there in which, if you feel delight, fullness, I would say like meaning, but no wealth, then you're really like in like one part of that circle. And perhaps you want to explore what it's like to be in different parts of that circle. If you feel comfortable, but a feeling of emptiness, then maybe you need to move more, into thinking about what your mission is. When I first saw this, I thought that maybe like the goal for me is like, okay, what's the thing I do in which I, meet all these goals? But for me, it seems impossible just to like address all of this. So I just sort of see it as, at some point in my life, I will be more mission oriented. And, at this point in my life, I'll be looking to, experience different parts. So that is basically what I wanted to leave with. And if you, want to be in touch or reach out or have any questions that don't get answered over here, here are all the different ways to contact me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandeep. I think we now have time for some questions. Raphael, you want to be the question manager?
Sure. And everyone that wants to ask Mandeep questions, please leave them on the chat. We have a question from Stephen. How are you able to find shadowing scaffolding opportunities in industry positions?
I was fortunate in that realm, in that I was in, I was in a company in which that was proposed as a way just to get familiar. And then also just with relationships with people that I built when I was there. So, I could just ask like, hey, like to a more senior researcher, it's like, hey, next time you're sharing your findings with the team, can you let me know? And it's like, okay, yeah, I'll let you know. So that's how I did it when I was at Shopify. And then in medical education, I wasn't shadowing to be, I was shadowing more for ethnographic reasons. So that was just how I was able to do it. But in terms of like, me asking to shadow someone that works like for a video game company right now, probably not possible. There's like a lot of high security. So in that scenario, I might just ask questions or an informational interview just to be like, hey, tell me about your week, or tell me about your day, or how do you share research?
Thank you. Do we have any more questions?
I think there were a couple more. Let's see. From Bo Wang. Did you see that one? Earlier.
We're getting more questions. So let me go with Michelle. When network or being interviewed, did you often have to explain what anthropology was to the people interviewing you, or the value of anthropology and how it relates to UX?
I probably did. People are always really excited about anthropology. So, it was kind of fun to talk about it and to talk about the work that I did. So, I probably had to figure out a way in which I could, translate anthropology to, this startup context and so on. So yeah, it's something that, I got practice at doing. I haven't done it in a while, but yeah, I definitely had to like educate a bit on what anthropology is. I think we do that anyways. Being in grad school, I was in sociocultural anthropology, and then people have very specific ideas of what anthropology is, like biological anthropology, evolutionary anthropology. So yeah, I was just doing the same stuff that I did anyways when I was a grad student.
Thank you. Julia is asking, for folks whose current academic positions are located outside major urban areas, what is your advice for networking, exposure to new fields, etc.?
Yeah, I can sympathize with that. I'm lucky that I was in Montreal, where it's very, vibrant, and I got to network in that context. I think just because we're in this remote first world right now, I find myself, I'm speaking here, would this have happened a year ago? Maybe not. I also, I feel less constrained by my locality now in terms of talks that I can attend than before. And, if I'm doing any networking now, it's happening over LinkedIn and so on. So I think embracing that is going to be helpful. Like now is probably a good time to be from, outside of a major urban area, but trying to make your way in, because we're all getting quite dispersed. In fact, there's someone here that I haven't met in real life, but, we met on LinkedIn and had a good Google chat. Hi, Hala.
Bo was asking, for those transitioning into UX research for anthropology PhD, how does one go about getting their foot wet by building some industry experience to build portfolio? Can we turn PhD projects into case studies to share job apps and interviews?
I'm just going to look at that question because I think I missed. Can you reread the question?
Sure. For those transitioning into UX research from anthropology PhDs, how does one go about getting their foot wet by building some industry experience to build portfolio?
Mm-hmm. There can be opportunities to volunteer. So in which you can just do, if you want to look at a nonprofit or something like that, you can look at that and, help them out in that way. Something for creating a portfolio. This I learned from a talk I attended several weeks ago. Suppose you see a website and you have some ideas as to how to make it better. You could have a case study in which it's like, well, this is what the experience is like now for, Uber Eats. What I would do differently is this. And then you can, propose what that might be, and then talk about why you think that's the case. For UX research, what's really exciting, what people really want to see with a portfolio is your process, your rationale. What questions do you have? Why do you want to do this? So you're able to, it's not about like the image that you create in the end, but it's really like the thinking process. So something hypothetical could be one way to illustrate the thinking process. Two, trying to do some volunteer work. Like that's where I was trying to get to with Hacking Health, working on projects with people. And I think if the first time I heard the question, I think you were proposing, should I be using my PhD research as a case study? I think if you can translate it into that, then, yes, like go and do it. When I was hiring for interns, like obviously like they may not have, created something for a company, but it's really like, do they know how to create a solid research question? Do they know the difference between a research question and an interview question? What's their thinking process? So just, your PhD work definitely shows that. So that will show that, you have quite solid research skills, even if you didn't get a chance to execute them into a product.
Thank you. Dean is asking if you have a sense of any ways that the UX research industry has been changing lately, any trends that you've been noticing?
Yeah, 2 or 3 things pop up. And I think if you search online, I forget the name of this group, UXR Collective, they had done a bit of a survey on, how is UX research looking in 2020? Some trends. Everything is remote. So that wasn't a big change for me. I was used to doing things remote, but some companies may have been used to participants coming, on the grounds or going to participants' homes and so on. So all that is remote, where there's a lot more, Zoom calls happening with people or Google video calls. That's one thing. Also, the way in which you share is also remote. There's no, benefit right now of like the workshop where you're there and you're with people and you can interact and share ideas. Now it's, how do you share things online when you're in different places? Presentations, creating videos. Something that I think I'm going to need to learn is just like really good video editing skills, just so I'm able to, get quotations and like share information just really quickly. So that way someone can just like press a button and, take in information, and that information is coming through words, audio, and visual. I think it's a good way to have impact with your research. Third, since more of the world is digital than ever before, I may be biased because I'm coming from the tech world, but since that, is the case, accessibility is something that was sort of like, let's think about that later. But now it's like people of all ages are online, people of all abilities are online. So that it's just more important than ever to make sure that like everyone is able to have equitable access to internet, or just to like do things. So I think that's something that would, give a lot of value.
Thank you. And Michelle is asking if you would recommend taking upon formal training in UX specifically. She mentions that many schools, private schools in Canada, began teaching specific courses on UX. Do you think that would make an individual more competitive in a hiring process?
I haven't heard of Red Academy. There are some courses that seem to be like $2,000 or $3,000, and I don't recall, hiring someone just on the basis of them having done that course. But it's also just how far you take those courses. There's also, cheaper courses as well. I think it gives a good overview of like an understanding of the vocabulary that's used. Maybe it invites you to do a project that you can then use to create your portfolio. So I don't think those courses on their own will sort of like get you in the door, but I think if you use those courses to create a portfolio, to like know the vocabulary, it's a really great starting point. That's just my perspective. This is something that you may want to ask a few other UX researchers about before making a decision.
Okay.
Oh, someone mentioned Slack. Yeah, Slack has some really, really great networking opportunities.
Okay, so I put the link in the chat for our complete March Madness series, and for those of you who attended tonight, we are making a recording of this this session so that you can listen to it over and over again, and share it with your friends. And so we did have an interesting talk last week with Tomo Sugimoto about UX research that I think nicely dovetails with Mandeep's presentation tonight. So if you're interested in that, we're going to post that on the American Ethnologist website, as we will publish Mandeep's presentation for tonight. Thank you, Mandeep, for giving us your time, your insight. And thank you all for coming tonight. I know that there was a little bit of difficulty with the double registration process, but the benefit of that is that we did not have any Zoom bombings. We were here and peacefully talking about an interesting area of research, and we really appreciate your support in coming out tonight. So thanks so much.
One more thing, I was able to upload my PDF, so maybe we'll just send that out when that video goes out to everyone.
Great. Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming tonight.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. I think she forgot to stay.
I was like, I think it will be like, I think we'll be able to use this room, but I think we can send her an email and she can come back.
Yeah, come back.
No, we should also